This isn't one of those haunted game stories. At no point you're gonna hear me claim something within the game spoke to me, react to my words, or force me to punch myself repeatedly in the face. No, this isn't a haunted game or a game doing something impossible or even something it shouldn't have. This isn't about a glitch or a hidden message, and at no time did I phone Nintendo headquarters only to have my questions answered with hushed whispers or agonizing screams. This story is about a game featured I don't think anyone else has unlocked. That's it. No ghosts, no conspiracies, just a secret we were all supposed to find, but never did. Something that changes an entire generation's childhood and the very essence of a multi-millionaire billion-dollar franchise. This is about what I assume to be a previous undiscovered alter ending of Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. In 1996, I received my first computer as a birthday gift. I'd been on the internet before, had used computers before, but it always had to be in school or at a friend's place. This one was mine, all mine. I explored the cruel, prehistoric web of the time with great interest. I downloaded all sorts of pornography and even printed it out, which made absolutely no sense. I also parted media like a madman. Music, games, anything. This is where I first discovered Mario World. I never had a Super Nintendo as a little kid, so it was all new to me. I downloaded tons of games along with the SNES emulator, but Mario World was my favorite. For over a decade, the same Mario World ROM was my trust-wasting hobby. I played it over and over again, beating the game faster and faster until I began to lazily explore the worlds with no particular purpose. Game Genie codes helped enormously. I could turn off the timer and relive into a particular entertaining map for an hour as I waited for a download or any number of boring events. It was in this manner that I must have beaten and rebeaten the game thousands upon thousands of times. There was comfort in the obsessive-compulsive behavior of this routine, but all that was shattered when I saw the Blind Boo. The Blind Boo, as I referred to it, was hovering over the exit from the haunted sunken ship level later on in the game. I called it blind because it actually had no visible eyes. It was like someone had made a lazy ROM hack. But I knew from years upon years of experience that this is a normal game. The Blind Boo just hung there over the exit pipe, blocking it. I turned my back on it, but it didn't chase me. How could it? It didn't even see me. Then I noticed something else out of sorts. There was a key and keyhole misplaced above the exit. Keys and keyholes are such ways of ending a level in an ulterior manner and discovering a secret area. Still, this didn't belong there, and I knew it. For a moment, I considered the fact I actually broken a ROM file from overuse. After taking a screenshot specifically to show all of you Mario Brothers fans out there, I picked up the key and opened the door, figuring the game was seized up and I had to restart. Instead, it opened up a new path on the map selection screen. A whirlpool next to Bowser's already creepy head cave thing. I pressed the right arrow and moved on to the whirling drain. Oh God, no. This didn't really strike me as odd because if you're familiar with the Mario World game, there was this area called Star Road that you may note has similar names. Just stuff like tubular and awesome and all the minor dumb words and phrases. Most of the areas were called Vanilla's Forest 1 and Donut Mountain 3 and all that, but there were maps with odd names like that. What did concern me, though, was Mario's expression. Surprise? Shock? Fear? I entered the map. Oddly enough, the whirlpool in the middle of a lake began with a stranded castle entry animation. Mario walked up to the castle door, looked up, and went in. I could tell it was underwater, though, because of the bubbles that periodically emerged from the sprite's mouth and flowed to the top of the screen. Inside the castle, it started to look more and more like I was in fact experimenting a glitch. There was no room to jump, no room to do anything but run left and right. I must have gone right for about 10 to 20 minutes just holding the B button, running along at full speed. After a while, I ran into 1 or 2 blind boos in the darkness above. Then 3 or 4. Then the screen was full of them. They just kinda hung there, doing nothing. They wouldn't chase me if I turned my back. As well as the previous blind boo. If I made any noise, like Mario's jump sound for example, they would just kinda shudder a bit, like they would hear the sound of Mario's movements but couldn't do anything about it. Then something made me stop and turn the other way. Now, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this map was designed specifically to screw with the player. Not because of the giant bleeding bill was hemorrhaging profusely from its face, but because it was inescapable. There was literally no way to avoid being killed by it, as you can clearly see above. That is, unless you're like me and you have the Game Genie codes on hand. I switched onto the code for permanent instability. I let the bleeding bill chase me for a while when I was invincible, just to get a good look at this thing. I stopped and killed it with my invertible touch, only when I saw a message that hadn't been there when I passed before. I hate you. That kinda creeped me out, but on the other hand it was kinda interesting because it meant this was definitely a map that was supposed to exist. This was some sort of a plot element here, something undiscovered. But what did it mean? Who hated me? King Koopa aka Bowser seemed to be the obvious answer, or maybe it was just the ghost. When you're in a haunted castle that you found by the way of a haunted ship, a bloody looking hate message isn't so unbelievable. I saw it again as I approached some giant boos. I was thankful that the blind boos ended at this point because the more I watched them shudder, the uneasier I felt, almost impeccably towards them. The thankfulness ended when I turned my back on the giant boos and this happened. Giant boos with faces I had never seen before. They always looked mad at being awakened, angry that you were invading their territory across the Mario World Island. This was different, and they looked gleeful, demented. I could see right down their throats, which seemed odd given the lack of detail their mouths usually displayed. And yes, of course, I'm going to address that message you saw in the photo. Won't you die? I don't know why. Am I supposed to? Who's asking? I let the giant boos touch me, and they all died like the bleeding bills, which of course I encountered too. Despite any attempt to scare the player, I knew that being invincible meant invincible no matter what they threw at me. After a while of running down this strange claustrophobic corridor with no more eventful happenings, I came to a room with an empty pipe. Taking the pipe downward, I came out to the other end and dropped into a room filled with water. The water made sense, this being a sunken castle beneath a whirlpool after all. I was rewarded for my troubles with a question mark block that released a mushroom for me. I could have easily done this with a cheat code, but the thought had escaped me as I faced with all these new and strange sights. The first creatures I encountered in the underwater portion of the castle were Fromps. Unless if you've been living under a rock since the mid-80s, you know Fromps are stone-like square creatures that hang from the ceiling and fall whatever you come near. Then they try to crush you, essentially. Well, these Fromps lined up in a tight row, dropped repeatedly and randomly with no real trigger or any sense of logic. They would just wait or drop whenever they seemed to feel like it. It also looked like these Fromps had been really successful. More cartoony, but this was getting pretty unusual for the Mario Brothers franchise, which I hadn't recalled seeing blood at all. But I have seen it used 3 times. The bloody bills, the messages, and those permanent smashing, grinding Fromps who were working their victims into a pulp forever. In the hampering effects of the water, I walked slowly under these things, making sure every single one touched me and died. There were almost 30 of them in a row. The sight of them mindlessly crushing over and over again just made me hate them with an unsettling intensity. What's weird is that the blood caused Mario to slide as if he was on an ice level. After walking through the Garden of Disperviously, I swam into a more open area that was filled with spikes on the floor and ceiling. It was difficult to swim in this manner without touching the spikes, but since I was still invincible, I didn't think much of it. I avoided them more for fun than any other sense I'd be damaged. It stopped being fun really fast, though. Now I knew some of what was going on. The bloody mess the Fromps were unendingly splattering. It was the other Marios. Past Marios that had tried to traverse this level and failed. I had to admit this. This was an excellent touch, even if it was just a bit ghoulish. Whoever had designed this map actually broke the fourth wall and showed you the bloated, motionless abortions of the players' own careless treatment of Mario's tiny light. The bodies only floated straight up and down a tiny bit, as if to show the effects of a light curtain. It was a genius, and I couldn't believe I might be the first and only person to ever see this. I toyed with the idea of taking more than one screenshot as I just presented to you, basically so all of you hearing this could enjoy the secret map as much as I had, especially this weird little touch. However, without swimming, without kicking or moving in any way, the dead Marios started to come at me like torpedoes. Their faces remained blank and blue and dead, but they moved with astounding speed. They angled and positioned and worked all sorts of unique textures that left me almost nowhere to move. They continued coming at me and swarming and backing up to try again, and I just couldn't bring myself to let them touch me. I moved with more speed and skill than I ever exerted, frantically trying to keep Mario free of the drowning victims that seemed dead set on rocketing straight into him. When I finally reached the purple exit pipe you see above, there had been 10 of those things right behind me, pitching, turning, and chasing me. I entered the pipe as fast as I could. Thankfully, it had worked properly and had Mario out of the situation in a heartbeat. The corridor that followed was empty, thankfully. It was just a blue underwater hallway of sorts with nothing to avoid or killed. It was boring and predictable like the game had been all these years, which brought back a sense of safety. At the end of the hallway, I came across to a stranded pair of doors that you entered to face the final boss. Beside the doorway, a mushroom power-up. I didn't touch that shit. Going through the doors was as you expect. The typical change of map views occurred, and Mario was standing on the bridge over boiling lava. Or had it been blood all along? When Mario walked onto the bridge, however, there was no boss creature. Instead, Mario immediately looked to the sides and froze. I couldn't control him anymore. He just stood there. Keep looking until you see it. I didn't even see it at first, so I didn't expect you to notice it right away. If you still haven't spotted anything, look at the third window from the left. FYI, that's not usually there. Mario seemed to regain his composure and looked back and forth slowly, surveying the room. There was still no boss, and I couldn't control him, so I stopped trying and watched. This went on and on for what seemed like forever. Nothing happened. Then a familiar face walked in from the right, dressed in green, tall, and angry. It was Luigi. Mario recoiled in horror. It's difficult to say that without thinking how crazy this sounds, but Mario really reeled back with some sort of terror that was uncriticized for such a peppy, happy-go-lucky mascot like him. Then Luigi spoke. You thought Koopa worked alone? It was all connecting now. The messages scrawled on the walls. I hate you, and why won't you die? Luigi. He's always been Mario's second banana, the player too, the one who doesn't get the princess in those early games. No matter how identical he is to Mario in his skill set and ability and trenches and bravely, at the end of the day, the game is Super Mario Brothers. And he's just the brother. How he must have hated Mario. Who among us wouldn't? Think about it. No matter what happens, Mario always comes back. No matter how many corpses he leaves littering the battlefield, he's always there once more to leap and cheer and get all the ovation. And Koopa hadn't worked alone? I didn't know what that meant at first, if anything, but again, you just have to think it through. How exactly does King Koopa consider successfully in kidnapping the princess? From day one, from the original Mario Brothers onward, it has always been an inside job. Still unable to control the character, I watched Mario simply cower in fear as Luigi leapt high into the air, as high as he could in Mario 2, the bastard child of the franchise. He jumped on the pathetic, weeping Mario again and again and again. I was powerless to stop it. When he was done, he seemed to look at Mario's limp body with this overwhelming rage. Then the bridge started to disappear. Soon Mario will be dead. As I looked on, I had an irration thought. Would it be permanent? With an instant, as Luigi turned to seemingly strike a victory pose like he had just beaten the level, Mario awkwardly got to his feet, took him by surprise. Fear and sadness and confusion had given way to anger, and Mario overpowered his brother with little effort. To this day, I'm still haunted by the final result of his wrathful representative. There was the map's title. None of this was a glitch. None of this was a mistake. It wasn't the developer getting back at Nintendo, and it wasn't a ghost haunting a Nintendo cartridge. It was planned, supposedly part of the Mario Brothers mythos. If you beat the same level X number of times, a secret path, a part of the world opened, and you learn from that Mario Brothers through Mario Land, Luigi had secretly been working against you, and was in fact fueling the repeated abduction and abuse of the princess. But why? Money? Power? No. It was all there, because he couldn't take not being the one in the spotlight, not being Mario himself. After Luigi died, well and truly died, Mario just sat on the edge of the bridge and just cried. I was forced to watch this for minutes on end before the screen went to black. I played the rest of the game through to see if anything changed. Nothing else odd happened, as one would expect, since the whole idea was just supposed to be part of the actual full story. I couldn't access the whirlpool again. I'd see the events once, and that is all I'm apparently allowed. It was back to the game as usual, the same exact game I played since the 90s, and would probably continue to play it for the rest of my days. Well, it was the same, except for that final image.